Thank you. Let me know if you can't hear me, but I used to teach over at CMC, and so with the young skiers and snowboarders, I had to really project because some of them had hit their heads too many times, but just to leave that with you. Thanks again for coming out this evening. Last couple of days have been brutal up here. I opened the door for our dog and it just went back in the house this morning, so thanks again. Give you a little bit of background. My wife and I actually ran an organization up here called Domus Pachas Family Respite. We ran it for almost 17 years. We brought families who were going through their cancer journey, a lot of them end of life, brought them up here for a week, gave them housing, food, activities, just to give them a break. But what was interesting, we greeted every family and we said goodbye to every family. And we had the privilege to meet and greet a number of families who were going to have their last conversation here up in the mountains. And to see the difference from when they first got here to when they left was an amazing privilege that my wife and I had during those 19 years. And to me, it just showed the impact of having that last conversation, of being able to talk with your loved ones about what your wishes are, what your needs are, where you want to go, and other things that we're going to talk about tonight. So that's my own personal feeling. We've had some family issues, which I won't get into, and my guess is everybody in this room has had some family issues under this situation. So again, thanks for coming. A quote that I heard, I went last week to actually hear the presentation done down in Mount Evans, was, "It's never too late until it's not." Think about that for a minute. It's never too late till it's not. One of our relatives died within 2 days of a diagnosis. We had friends, both in a car, auto crash, died. Son-in-law who had a heart attack. Now he made it, but he was 45, okay? So again, it's never too late till it's not. What we're going to be doing is talking through various aspects of what's called the Conversation Project. It's a national organization. It's been around since 2010, I think it is. And a woman named Eileen Goodwin, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, actually started it up. And she started it up because of all of the issues she ran into with her mother who had dementia. She kept asking herself, is this what Mom wanted? Is this what Mom would want? So that's what drove her to set up this national not-for-profit. And they've been literally across the world in terms of these same concepts. Okay. Where's my little clicker? Did I? Oh, you can get it? Okay. All right. So a little bit, Foothills Conversation. I just want to put a plug in for Mount Evans Home Care and Hospice. They're in Evergreen. I'm actually a hospice volunteer there. Amazing staff, amazing volunteers. Unfortunately, we do not have hospice here in Summit County. I know there are some folks that are trying to work on that. And if you know of any that could have influence, please do, because hospice, my opinion, is a wonderful thing. But Mount Evans, the volunteer group that does this presentation, they actually have been very, very easy to work with and welcoming to come up here and talk with us. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about having the conversation. Having the conversation. And then we're going to get into completing advanced directives. And these are extremely important, from not only letting people know what you want, but letting your doctors know what you want, and probably most importantly, letting the legal system know what you want. Because there's some nasty things that can happen if you don't have any of this stuff written down, at least my opinion. And then what I'd like to do, what we'd like to do, is save questions and discussion for later. We'll have some time at the very end to be able to talk about this in more detail. So, survey done 2 years ago. 70% of all of us want to die at home. Okay? Do you want to die at home? You don't have to shake your head, yes or no. But I would think you would like that. 70% of us actually die in a healthcare facility. Big difference. Okay? 80% of us want to talk to our docs. And this is something I didn't realize that I have to be better at. We want to talk to our docs about what our wishes are, because our docs control what sort of activities, medical activities go on. 15% have had that conversation with your docs. Take a minute to think about that. Have you talked to your doctor about what your wishes are? Even though you might not be seriously ill, okay? Is there something written down somewhere that tells your docs, or you've had the discussion with your docs, how much medical care should I have? How far should you go if something should happen to me? So in 2023 survey of 50 plus, which a good portion of us, but I'm glad to see some younger folks in the background there, said if they were seriously ill, it was important that people making the decisions for them understand what they wanted. Think about that. Again, you're lying in your hospital bed, you're unconscious. Wouldn't you want your wife, your friend, your daughter, your son to be able to make and be guided to make a decision about your medical care for you? And actually, only 53% of the people said they had someone that was close to that piece of knowing what they wanted for their end of life, what they wanted for their medical care, and so forth. You want to? Yeah, let me try this.
So I can do it. But this is an emergency room nurse.
Yeah.
And she's going to talk about what happens when families have not talked about this.
Patients get acutely ill, come into the ICU, and nobody's discussed it. Some family members aren't ready to let go and to say, let's not do more aggressive measures. And so they'll say, to the staff, oh, of course Mom would want everything done. And other members would be like, no, she wouldn't have wanted that done, And the way that I help, and a lot of us do, is to say to the family members, well, if your mom were listening to us, what would she be telling us to do? Or, what was important to her in her life? I think if decisions were made by...
Oops, I'm sorry. Oh, you're good, though. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And this is another newsreel of a family that actually comes together to talk about their conversation.
Okay.
And finally tonight, ABC News wants to join you in something right at the heart of the American family. How we can all help the people who care about us make decisions near the end of our lives. And 9 out of 10 of you have told us that we should all be talking about it at all ages, what we want. And yet only a fraction of us have done it. And we know it makes a huge difference in the health of the caregiver as well as those cared for. So ABC News has taken cameras inside a vital, loving family, part of a new community, deciding to have the conversation.
This is 85-year-old Norb and his daughter Maureen.
My dad is 85 today. He's still very, very active. He's a wonderful friend.
Throughout life, daughter and father have always talked about everything, except one thing: how to control the end of your life in the same way you control the prime of your life. So dad and daughter gather the family together, 3 generations, for an act of love.
And so now we're just asking that you share some of your thoughts about what you would like at the end of your life, so that we can honor your wishes.
They are part of something new underway for families in America that says having the conversation is a gift parents and children give each other. And there's proof of the difference it makes. Studies show depression rates plummet after a loss if the families have had the conversation. Renowned physician Dr. Atul Gawande says doctors and nurses see it firsthand.
When you're there in that moment and you're talking to the family and you're saying, how much will it bother your father if he ends up this way? And they say, more often than not, I don't know. We never talked about it. That it is incredibly traumatic for the family, for the doctors involved. There's often conflict. It can tear families apart.
So Dr. Gawande has become part of a team led by Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Ellen Goodman. It is called the Conversation Project. It is a kind of guide for families looking for a way to begin.
If we give them a way to talk about it and give people something to hang on to when they're afraid to start this conversation, they can do it and pass it on.
Families like the Jennings. They looked over the conversation guide before they sat down together. First, there's laughter.
My golf swing's still good.
And then Dad directly eases his daughter's guilt and worry about having put their mother in hospice.
I felt like that meant we were giving up on Mom.
She was in a lot of pain, and I think it was handled real well.
And next, Maureen asks her dad for clarity on what he considers a good end to a great life.
So if you were in a condition where you couldn't make decisions for yourself, how extreme would you want us to take measures to save your life versus letting you go?
Well, I think I'm ready to go anytime. I wouldn't prolong anything. I mean, I've lived a great life. Pretty lucky. And because of you guys, and
Unexpectedly, a grandson is inspired to speak up about his own wishes for his own life.
That if there was no meaningful communication, that I would want you to stop trying to intervene.
we aren't ready for you to go that soon.
Well, we're not ready for you to go that soon either, so.
One by one, the others weigh in, all ages.
Don't do that.
Happy birthday, dear Grandma.
And with that, another family has joined a kind of estate planning for the heart.
Go.
The conversation beginning in America.
So isn't that an interesting idea, an estate plan for the heart? So I got a question for you. Who's the first person you should have the conversation with? Who's the very first person you should have the conversation with? Yourself. Exactly. You have to know what you want, what you believe in, what your feelings are, before you can talk to anybody else about them. So it takes some time. My wife and I have been joking back and forth because of this session about our conversation. And I've learned things that, being married 47 years, right, honey? Good, I got the right number. That I didn't know about her. And I think she's learned things about me, hopefully, that she didn't know before we started this discussion. And it's going to continue on because there's a lot there. There's a lot for us to pack and unpack and talk about. So the first person you talk with is yourself. Now, within your packet that we provided you this evening, there's a series of kind of structured questions that you can use, I would argue, to help yourself think about the issues that are important to you and the issues that are important to what you need to talk with whomever you're going to talk about. Could be your daughter, could be your son, could be your wife, could be your aunt, could be your best friend, all of the above. So that's there. So you'll see there's more questions in this, but there's questions like, as a patient, I'd like to know only the basics. I don't really care what you guys find out. I don't want to know about it. Or I want to know everything about it. What do you want? Medical decisions made. My doctors know best, so I'm going to do whatever they want. No, I want to have a say in every healthcare decision. I know where I'm going on that one, but that's a whole separate discussion. You know, what concerns me about medical treatment? I won't get enough. I'm going to be in pain. I'm going to be suffering. Or I don't want that much treatment. I want to be awake. I want to be alive. I want to be able to do things for some period of time before something really goes south in my condition. You know, and finally, where do you prefer to be toward the end of life? I don't know how many people really want to spend their day in the healthcare facility, but there are nursing facilities that are really nice. Do you want to stay there? Or do you want to spend your last days at home? And how do you make that happen? So there are additional questions which will help you kind of think through what you need to talk about with your loved ones. So the question, again, who's the first person you talk to? Yourself. And the question you ask yourself, what matters most to you? Not to your wife, not to your son, not to your daughter, not to your neighbor, not to your friend, but to you. You deserve that. So actually give you some prompts if you don't know how to bring things up to a loved one. You know, I need you help with something. Can you and I have a conversation about such and such? Son. Even though I'm okay right now, I'm worried that, and I want to be prepared. Can we talk about some things that matter to me? So there's a series of lines that you can use in discussing with your friends that, again, is in the packet that I think are really helpful for
And sometimes you're trying to get someone else to talk about
Yes,
their wishes.
thank you.
So I might talk to an elderly parent, and so you can kind of adapt these. I want to know what matters to you. What kinds of treatments do you think
thank you.
are important?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Yep. You want to?
Yeah.
This is kind of a tongue-in-cheek piece, but I think you'll get the point.
It does help to practice.
Mom.
Mom.
Dad.
Sweetie, can we talk?
Everyone, dies.
So, how do you want to go? Do you have a plan for your end-of-life care? Because I don't.
Don't take this the wrong way, but you're not getting any younger.
So I was binge watching Game of Thrones, which reminded me that everybody dies.
No.
You've heard of a birth plan, right? It's like that. Only the opposite. I need your help with something. Can we talk?
My biggest fear is losing you, and that I won't know how you want me to care for you toward the end.
Remember what happened to Aunt Maria? I don't want that to happen to you.
You've taken care of me your whole life. Now it's my turn to take care of you.
So, some thoughts about your wishes for end-of-life care. First of all, your feelings about life-sustaining treatment. Do you want the medical system to keep you alive no matter what? And they can pretty much do that. They can pretty much do that. How far do you want them to go? How far do you want them to go? What's a quality of life? Is sitting in a nursing home bed quality of life for you, or is it going out and trying to travel and meet people before the end is near? So what is your quality of life for you? How your treatment decisions would be influenced if you had a dementia diagnosis. We're going to talk a little bit about that. There's a whole specialty of forms and discussions because of dementia that you need to be aware of. And And then what sort of comfort and spiritual support would you prefer? Would you want to have a priest? I'm Catholic. Would you want to have a priest come and give you last rites? Would you want to have a minister be at your bedside? Okay? Okay. Okay. And what sort of comfort would you want to have at your bed? Would you want to have music playing in your room? Would you want to have poetry read? Would you want to have a Reiki, was it Reiki? Reiki experience. So there are different options that are available to you, in those last few days. And again, it's your choice, but you have to tell somebody. Somebody has to know about that. And your preferences around hospice. Do you want to become part of a hospice program? Interesting statistic, which always shocks me, is that typically within 3 days of a person being in hospice, they pass away. So what that tells me is they weren't there early enough. They weren't there early enough. There's nothing wrong with being in hospice for 6 months, for 3 months. Even, I think we've seen a year. Matter of fact, I'm visiting hospice patients that have been in hospice for a year. But being in hospice, you have dedicated care, you have pain control, you have support. So it's something that I definitely have strong support for. So these are all the sorts of things, again, that you need to consider as you think about the conversation you're having with yourself. First of all, you have that conversation with yourself, with your doctors, with your friends, with your loved ones, whomever is going to be able to touch you in your experience. And then this will be the next part Terry's going to handle, which is extremely important. You got to have advanced directives. You got to have the legal stuff in place. Go ahead, Terry.
Thanks. And let me know too if you need me to speak up. But I was a professor for 35 years, so I'm used to speaking in large rooms. Usually didn't need a mic. Okay. So you might think, well, things are fine now. I don't need to really think about this too much. But these are some facts you should know. Over half of us will not be able to participate in our end-of-life decisions. We'll either be incompetent because maybe of dementia, or maybe in some sort of coma state, or we can't communicate. So we have to let people know what we want, because we may not be able to tell them or the doctors, other medical workers at the time of our illness. And also, in this country, we have a fairly fragmented healthcare system. I go get vaccinations at the grocery store, at the pharmacy. I go to an urgent care sometimes. Once in a while, I'll go down to Anschutz to my doctor. And if I get sick, I might end up at St. Anthony's. Who knows? Well, all of these pieces don't necessarily communicate well with each other. And so you need to have documents in place. You have to have had the conversation so that if you become ill, these people who are taking care of you will know what you want. And they might not be the person you've seen all the time for your annual physicals, or even if you're going through some sort of intensive treatment for a condition, they may not be the people who are in the emergency room if you go to the hospital for an emergency. The other thing we'll talk about briefly in a few minutes is that we have fairly unique law in Colorado, or statute, regarding end-of-life decision-making. The state of Hawaii and the state of Colorado stand out. They're very different, and I'll go through that in a few minutes. But because you all are here in Colorado right now, this is especially important to you. Oh. So we'll watch this video. I don't know if I can start it from here. I'm sorry. But you'll see from this video that even within families, they don't necessarily have the same understanding of what they're.
Yeah, Cousin Lucy's husband is in the hospital.
I know, I heard about that.
You guys know what it is that I'd want, right? If I was ever in that situation?
Sure.
Yeah.
You'd like to be taken care of at
In the
home.
hospital.
Okay. And as for care, I'm most concerned that I'll get
Too much.
little.
Do you not know? It doesn't make who's gonna pay all that money. He doesn't even know what is okay. Okay. I think we need to get clear on what you want, Mom.
I know at times the two of you don't always agree on things, and that's okay. But this time, I need you to listen to what it is that I really want. This is my way of having control over a situation that I most likely won't be able to control.
Okay, Mom. Tell us what matters most to you.
We're all ears.
So again, you might assume your family knows what you want, but they might not, and so they have these disagreements. And you don't want them having those disagreements when you're in an emergency room or a doctor comes in to ask what the next step of treatment should be, okay? So why are these advance directives then, the written forms that make up the advance directive, why are they important? If you have those in place, your chances of having your wishes fulfilled and followed are going to be much higher. So your clinicians and your family will understand what you want because you've had the conversation with them, you've put things in writing, and then hopefully you'll die the way you want to die. We do know that if people have things in writing, usually it can reduce unwanted hospitalizations. So I'll give you a brief story about my father. My father was on hospice. He had an advance directive saying he wanted to die at home. He did not want to die in the hospital. But while in hospice, he had a stroke. And my mother, she loves him dearly. The first thing she wants to do is get him to the hospital. And then the hospice nurse says if he goes to the hospital, they will put him on a feeding tube, and they will, if he needs it, he'll be put on a breathing support. He has in his advance directive, he does not want that. So my mother knew that, but emotions get the best of you in those times of trauma. And so it just took all of us to kind of sit down with her and review his advance directive. And we kept him at home. They kept him comfortable. 3 days later, he died in his home, looking out at the lake that they had lived by for many, many years. And that's how he wanted to go. So there's treatment needed, and you have to let people know what you do and don't want. You might then be able to use hospice services if you have these advance directives in place. And then there's an increased likelihood that you will die where you prefer to die. Not absolute certainty, but an increased likelihood. So in the state of, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the advance directive, it actually has a few components to it. And I'll just talk through each one briefly here, and then a couple of them we'll talk about in more detail. So the advance directive is part of what we call advanced care planning. And part of that is having the conversation as well. But one part of the advance directive is the medical durable power of attorney. You might have heard of it as your healthcare agent. It's referred to a couple different ways. This is not necessarily the person who has power of attorney for other aspects of your estate and things like that, okay? This is for medical issues. It can be a different person. So the medical durable power of attorney is someone who will speak for you, share your wishes if you are unable to do so. And we'll go into more detail on that in a minute. Then another part of the advance directive for some people is a CPR or DNR. Do you know what those are? So the do not resuscitate or the cardiopulmonary resuscitation order, you don't necessarily have to have one of those separate, but many people do, especially if they have a health condition, a serious health condition. And that is something that has to be completed with a physician or a physician's assistant, and they will sit down with you and fill out that form. And basically you're saying, if I go into cardiac arrest, I do not want to be resuscitated. And many people who have this, I'm not going to talk more about this now, but many people who have it will put it in a very visible place in their home, because if paramedics or the ambulance comes to your home, you've called them, they will look, say, on your refrigerator or by your front door. Is there a CPR directive posted? So they know what to do in that case, okay? But again, this is not something you can fill out on your own, so we're not going to talk about it too much tonight.
One item with all of these, it's interesting, the session that I went to, a couple of individuals talked about actually having all of these documents in their car in case they were in an auto accident. So just something to think about.
Mm-hmm. The most is another form that is filled out by a physician, and those are medical orders. I'm going to have to know this acronym. Medical orders for, is it specialized treatment or something? Yeah. But basically, again, it's more detailed issues that a doctor will talk through, and this is usually if you have a serious health condition. A lot of times people who are living in assisted living or nursing homes have these filled out. Some states require them to have them if they're in those facilities. So again, this isn't something we're going to talk about in detail because it would not be something you could do on your own. You would have to sit down with a physician and talk about it, okay? And then the other part of the advance directive is a living will. And I'm sure most of you have heard of those, maybe. The living will is a more detailed set of instructions about treatments you do or do not want to have should you, have a healthcare crisis. It might include things about where you want to die, how you want your body disposed of, who you want to be around you when you're dying. There are many different ways you can do a living will, and if you look online, you'll find under the Conversation Project, they have some examples. How many of you have heard of the 5 wishes? That's a living will, and I guess maybe in March, you might be having a session here about the 5 wishes. Yep. And how you could complete that. But that is this more detailed set of instructions, okay? And whoever you appoint as your medical durable power of attorney should have a copy of that. And I would encourage you to go through that with them. When my mother did hers, she mailed it to all 7 of us, her children, and we all started calling her, is something going on? No, I just want you to know what I want. And I was glad she did that because I was able to read through it, and then I could call her back and say, I don't totally understand what you mean here. Let's talk about it so I understand. So again, it's important if you do a living will not to tuck it away in a drawer, but talk to the people who matter about what's in that so they understand it, okay? So those are the pieces. We're mostly going to talk tonight about the MDPOA, and we'll talk a little bit more about living will, okay? So let's talk about, who should have these different things? I would say anyone over the age of 18 to 64, whether you're healthy or not, you should have a medical durable power of attorney. You should have that designated. You could be in a car accident tomorrow at age 18, and in the state of Colorado, it's critical that you have designated someone who will make your health care decisions. Okay?
Or someone else is going to make those decisions.
Yeah, and we'll talk about why that is. Okay, so it's critical. And in your folders, we have a form where you can actually fill it out. You can decide who you want that person to be. You have an alternate. because many people will designate their partner, their spouse, and then if they were in an accident or something together, who would they turn to? So there's always an alternate designated as well. And we'll talk about how you choose that person, but it's important to fill out, who you're naming. You should talk with them first so they know. This should not come as a phone call out of the blue and have someone say, oh, by the way, so-and-so has had a critical accident or is seriously ill, and you're supposed to make their health care decisions. You need to talk with them. I have 2 sons, and now they're in their 30s, but when they were younger, in their 20s, I didn't have either of them as an MDPOA. I just didn't think they were emotionally able to handle that. So you have to think really hard, and we'll talk about some of the critical criteria. If you are younger and have a health condition, you might also want to seriously think about having a living will. Okay? Now, if you're older, 65 plus, which many of us are, you certainly want to have the living will and the MDPOA, even if you're not seriously ill. Okay? And then if you are seriously ill, you should sit down with your physician or physician's assistant and talk about whether you want a CPR directive. It's totally up to you. And whether you should have the medical order scope of treatment the most. Okay? So not everyone needs everything right away. So I don't want you to look at this and get overwhelmed and say, well, it's too much, I'm just not going to do anything. You should do at least a MDPOA, and we'll talk about it now, why that is. In the state of Colorado, you have decision-making capacity for yourself. Thank goodness, right? We all can make our own healthcare decisions. But we might not always be able to do that. If you're a legal guardian of someone who has like a disability or is mentally incompetent, then you are automatically, by the statute, if you're their custodian, then you have the ability to make decisions for them. However, when the patient is lacking decisional capacity, when they cannot speak for themselves, or they don't have the cognitive capacity, then you have to turn to that MDPOA. If there's no MDPOA in the state of Colorado, they don't automatically turn to your next of kin. Most states in the US, that's what they do. They'll turn to the next of kin. Okay, if you're a child, they'll turn, and you're not partnered, then they'll turn to a parent or something. But in the state of Colorado, we don't do that. We're one of the 2 states that don't do that. And here, what the healthcare provider is supposed to do is identify and bring together all interested persons, with each having an equal seat at the table, and they are supposed to have a discussion about what the patient would want. Now, I'm one of 7 kids, and we don't agree on a lot of things. At least a couple people are always on the outside of this. So I can just imagine what a terrible situation this would be. And who are all interested persons? Maybe who the doctor thinks are all interested persons aren't necessarily who the patient would think would be all the interested persons. So, and the other issue here is, do you think this is going to take some time? Yes. And here you're in a healthcare crisis. You want to be able to act expediently, right? So this is why anyone over the age of 18 who no longer has a parent speaking for them should have an MDPOA. Okay? And you don't want to take up important time. You don't want to have conflicts arising. This is like anxiety provoking enough when a loved one is sick. You don't want to have more anxiety because you're fighting with everybody about what to do. Okay? So next of kin will not be automatically turned to for decision making. Now, I've heard some people say, well, I was in the hospital and that's what the doctor did. I don't know what some medical practitioners do, but this is what the statute is, okay? So this is in theory what's supposed to happen. So if you want to raise your hand, how many of you have a medical durable power of attorney? A lot of you do, great. Now, do they know that they are your MDPOA? Because if not, make sure you tell them.
You gotta tell them.
And make sure you've had the conversation with them. Even if you haven't gotten all those other forms done, make sure you've talked to them about what you want. Because, you know, the reason partly why I didn't have my kids when they were younger do this is I thought, we've had discussions before, and I said to my husband, good thing we have things written down, because I would not want those two boys making my decisions. And they're great young men, but young people think differently about life than older people do, you know? So you want to make sure what matters to you is out there for them. So how do you choose this healthcare proxy, this medical durable power of attorney? Whoops, just wait. There. Make sure it's someone who is able to make decisions that follow your wishes. We all know people, even in our own families, people we love dearly, who always think they know best. So we want them to know, I don't care what you think, this is what I want, and make sure they will follow those decisions. And also, make sure there's someone who's comfortable making quick decisions. And because not everything is black and white, and sometimes situations change and they might have to think quickly. And that's partly why I didn't have my boys do this in their 20s. I just thought, no, they'll be a mess. They won't be able to do this. So the perfect proxy, medical durable power of attorney, or your medical proxy, is someone who can do both of those things. In your packets, you have a form that you might choose to use to help you kind of think through a couple options. So you might write 3 people's names. So I might have written my husband's name, my oldest son, my next son, 1, 2, and 3. And then go down the list of criteria and give a check mark to each of those individuals if they meet that criteria. And that'll help you. So like the first one says they meet the legal criteria. Are they adults? They have to be adults. Would they be willing to speak on your behalf? Would they be able to separate their own feelings? And it's not a horrible thing if they can't. Some people just get too emotional, and then they might not be a good MDPOA. So look through that chart. It's in your folders if you need some help figuring this out. And then at the end of going through all the criteria, who had the most check marks? They should probably be your designated person, your number 1 person. Okay? So that might help you. So we'll watch this. Again, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but these are some of the things you can run into when you're thinking about who to select. And this might help you see who would make the best choice.
Be your healthcare proxy? Like if you need someone to tell the doctor what to? I just go with whatever the doctors say. I wouldn't want to bother them. They're so busy. Doctors know best, right?
Be your healthcare proxy? Sure, I'd be happy to. If I'm in town, check out my Instagram pics from Peru. Wish you were here.
Oh, I could never let you go. I can't even throw a plant away. As long as it's got one little green leaf. I'd be like, can't we upload her to the cloud?
Well, heck yeah! I've given this a lot of thought. Let me tell you what decisions you're best off going with. You never let them resuscitate you. And if they even try to hook you up to one of those breathing machines, never! I got this! I totally got this!
How can you even talk about this? I can't, okay? I just can't. Mom, it's not like you're gonna die. No, I can't talk right now.
Oh wait, did I show you that meme from iFunny? The cat and the dishwasher? Oh my gosh, okay. So the cat's like, bleh. And then that is, oh wait, sorry, what?
Well, hon, you and I have been through so much together. Here's what we'll do. We'll sit down, we'll get a cup of coffee, and you tell me what matters to you.
Well, it wouldn't be easy. I mean, I'd be sad, but I'd have your back.
I remember when we went through this with Mom, we really spoke for her. So I think I can do that for you. Let's talk about what you would want.
Again? Okay, so again, you have to give this some deep thought. And, you know, it's totally up to you who you want. So don't let people badger you into making you designate them, okay? So this is the form that's in your folders. And this is something you can fill out on your own. You do not have to go and have this done by an attorney. You basically put your name, information there, and then this is who you're appointing. And you give their contact information. And then you're naming them as my agent to make and communicate my healthcare decisions. Then you have an alternate, and please make sure you do that alternate one. That's very critical, okay? And it says you can have an alternate too. I don't know, if you wanted, I guess you could. But, and then you can also write a few kind of simple, brief instructions here. And then you need to have it witnessed, and it should not be witnessed by one of these two people. You have to have it witnessed by someone else who doesn't have like an interest here. So it can be a neighbor. I had my secretary do it when I did mine. You do not have to have it notarized in the state of Colorado. However, many people, if you look on the back, there is a place for a notary, and many people go like to their bank and have it notarized. And the reason that might be useful is if you're out of the state of Colorado and that document is questioned, then it usually helps if there is a notary that it'll be seen as more legitimate, okay? But you do not have to have it notarized. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one thing. There's this is on a smaller piece of paper.
Yeah.
And the thought there was, not only do you keep this at home, but you either put it in your car
can I show
or
this?
best yet, put it in your wallet.
Yeah, so it's like a little wallet card.
Yeah.
And so the exact same information will go on this as you have on your official form.
So that again, you know, if something happens to you, the EMS group is going to go right to your wallet, go through your wallet, see what's going on, and they'll see right away who they should be calling in case they can't talk to you.
Yeah. Okay? So that's the medical durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, healthcare agent, whatever you want to call it, but that's the person who will speak for you. And these are not set in stone, so you can change them later. You know, you might decide, well, you know, oh, I got divorced. I'm not having that person anymore. And you take them off. Or like with my sons, as they got older, I took my sister off as my alternate and put my oldest son. So you can change these. But if you do, make sure you get rid of the former one and tell everyone who has it, I've updated that. Okay? So when should you do this? And how often? We'll hear from this community advocate, and she'll tell you her thoughts, and I think she makes some really valid points here.
And I think what we've typically seen is that this conversation happens when folks tend to be older or there may be an illness. And so I think in the minds of everyone, it's kind of something to happen when you're quote unquote old and sick. I'll give you an example. I just ran a table at an expo that we had recently. It's called the 50 Plus Expo. And I was just asking people as they pass, do you have an advance directive? Have you had this important conversation? And one of the people said, I'm 87 and still ticking, so I don't need that. And it was just this idea of that's something I'll think about when I'm sick. And so really our campaign is all about trying to get anyone over the age of 18 in the county to talk about this so that it's not this kind of scary, death-focused, if you bring it up, it means something's wrong with you conversation. It's just something that we all do because as we all know, anything can happen to anyone at any time. Just because you are 18 doesn't mean you're invincible. So I think that's really important for us, is to take it out of that mindset of it's for death, it's for sickness, it's for older people, and make it more of a cultural norm.
So again, some of you might want to have talks with children or grandchildren about this. So as Vince said, the good quote is, it's never too late till it's not. You got to get it done. So once you have that in place, once you've done, I haven't said a lot about the living will, but again, this living will is this set of instructions, more detailed instructions about the treatments you do and don't want. And when you do a living will, some of them, I think the 5 wishes does have to be notarized, right? No? No. So witness, though. Yeah. So again, in some states, they might have a different law about that, but here we don't require notarizing. But when you have these documents, make sure again that you talk to people about them. They do no good if you just tuck them away. And don't only share them with your MDPOA, but share them with your physicians. I know when you go into like when I've been in the hospital, when I'm checked in, they ask me if I have a living will. Yeah. And they want a copy of it. They want these documents so they can follow your wishes.
And I think a lot of the portals, like Anschutz and St. Anthony's, in the portal, I think you can go up and actually download those documents. And if you think about it, that's an ideal scenario, especially if you're in the emergency room and those docs can download your wishes. They're right there in your portal next to all your medical records. So check your portal. And if you have the ability to do that, boy, I think it's a wonderful way.
Yes, and again, and then make sure you've talked through your wishes with people. Because sometimes what's in writing is a little hard to follow. The other thing is all of these documents can be altered. You can alter them at any time, but make sure you get rid of the old copies and make sure the critical people have the new ones. Okay, because I know I'm about to redo some stuff in my 5 wishes. Things change as you age, and they might change as you get certain health conditions. I know just the way we dispose of bodies, it used to just be, are you going to be embalmed and buried, or are you going to be cremated? Well, now there's all sorts of things. And if you have that information in your living will, and if you decide to change it, then you want to put it in there and get rid of the old copies, okay? So that's important. So when should you absolutely make sure you look at these documents and update them and have an extended conversation? The Bar Association shares this, and they call it the 6 Ds. So every decade. So, what you wanted when you were 30 might be very different than when you're 60 or 70. So look at them and at least read through them and see if they're still reflecting your wishes. If there's a death, so again, maybe one of your MDPOAs has passed away. Now you've got to update that and get a new one, okay? Or sometimes when we experience the death of a close loved one, we see things that we thought were handled really well, and we also see things that were not handled well. And sometimes that's the impetus to get us thinking about what we want, and it might lead us to change some stuff, okay? If there's a divorce, you might want your ex to still be your medical power of attorney, but you might not. So anything that changes that configuration in your family might be something to merit some changes to your documents. If you have a new diagnosis, so you have a new health condition, that might lead you to think differently about what kinds of treatments you do and don't want, okay? So that's really important. If you have a decline in your health, then you might want to look at things and make sure they still are reflective of your wishes. And then finally, if you have a new domicile, if you move, especially if you move to a different state, because that state might have completely different laws about all of this. Whether you need to have things notarized, whether you need to have an attorney draw the documents up. So you want to make sure that you're adhering to the statutes in the state you're residing in. Now, some people say they travel or they go somewhere in the winter. Yeah, I mean, I just take your documents with you when you have major trips or extended stays somewhere. And again, hopefully they'll still be followed if they're notarized and stuff. I haven't lived out of states that much, so I don't really know where things will stop. And I'm not an attorney, I'm not going to go into that. But, you know, it's absolutely if you move, make sure you get things altered. Anything to add to that?
No. Okay.
Whoops, was that it? Oh, I'm sorry, I just hit a blank. Okay. I did want to say one other thing, because I'm not going to say much about the living will, but those living wills, those orders that you've specified in your living will document, they do not actually go into effect for, I think it's 48 hours, and then 2 doctors have to agree that, you know, you are kind of, what's the word I want?
In need?
In need, yeah. That it's important that they can then look at those things. They can make a decision. So you might have it there, and just because you come into the hospital, they're not going to immediately do what's in your living will. They will wait for 48 hours to take it, have that take effect. So completing the starter guide, that's in your folders, are these broad questions which Vince said you really need to think about. And you do. I know the first time I filled out the 5 wishes, I sat down and I was like, well, I don't know. So then I had to put it aside and kind of kept thinking about it. I'd be on the stair machine at the gym thinking about what I wanted. But these are things that most of us don't talk about and think about every day. Okay? So look at it, get your heads thinking about it, and then turn to that. And really understand that your wishes might change. This, though, start working on that if you haven't. And if you have an MDPOA already, reconsider. Are they still the best choices for you? Okay? Now, another thing some people say is, well, I want to have someone nearby. That's fine, but you know, they can be called. I am the only one in my family who lives in Colorado. So if I were to be needing my MDPOA, other than my husband, there's no one here. My sons are away, my siblings are away. So you can have people other places, but you do want them to be someone who could be reached. One of my sons works on a ship. I'm not going to have him, because half the time we have no idea where he is, right? Make sure the people who matter know what you want. You might even write them a little narrative, a little letter about what's important to you and how you want your end to be. And absolutely make sure you've shared this information with your healthcare providers, okay? Because it would be really awful if, say, you had a DNR. Now, your doctor should know that, but you might end up going to a hospital where your doctor doesn't work, and then, you know, your family comes in and they're like, well, they didn't want to be resuscitated. Well, that's too late now. They've put a breathing tube in you, and, you know. So you've got to make sure that these documents are available and that you've shared them with the people who are going to be treating you. And then always keep having the conversation, okay? And keep having it with the people who matter to you, too, about what they want. Because I know it's hard. When I taught, I taught a course on death and dying, and I would have my students go talk to family about different things. They're like, no one wants to talk about this. And I remember once I said to them, these are some questions I want you to ask your family, your parents, your grandparents. Do they have their end-of-life decision-making, their legal papers in order? And I can't tell you, probably 3/4 of them came back and said, yeah, they have a will. I'm like, I'm not talking about their will and trust. We're talking about healthcare decisions. But most people, they think, well, I got my will made. I know who I'm leaving this and that. Well, but more importantly, how do you want to die? How do you want those last days to be? Anything else?
No, I guess 2 comments. One, personally, I don't want somebody else making decisions for me, especially when I'm not aware of what those decisions are. That's number 1. Number 2, I think the first time I saw this presentation, really having the doctors understand what your wishes are. And all of us, my guests in this room, have multiple doctors. Okay? We actually have a competition between my wife and I who has the most specialists. I don't know who's winning right now, but yeah.
Well, and you have to remember, doctors are trained to save lives.
They're going to keep you
They
alive.
will do everything they've learned how to do, even if it might not be the best thing for you. They will do it.
Yeah.
They don't like, a death is a failure to them, and that's not what they're wanting. Yeah.
So those are the 2 attitudes.
Yeah. And so you've got these materials in your folders, but you can also go to the conversationproject.org. That's the website for the national group who started all this, who were very generous to share their videos and their material with us. And they have so much on there. And they have some advanced directive information for people with dementia. As Vince said, there's some specialized materials. So if you look on there, they have some things for caregivers of people with dementia.
It's an excellent website. A lot of resources.
And if you like those films, they have about 50 more you can watch. So, yeah.